Okay, Chairman.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's overview and scrutiny meeting. And welcome to Adele to our first meeting, our new monitoring officer at Northamptonshire Scrutiny. And I hope we have a long time working together. So going on to the first item on the agenda is there any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillor McEwen, Chair.
And any of us? That's noted. So notification of request to address the meeting, Paul.
Yes, we've had one request in from a member of the public, Miss Buckingham, who wishes to address the committee on agenda item 6, the budget and financial plan, and agenda item 7, the local council tax support scheme.
And when will she come in then? Just
Well,
before number 6 starts.
Yes, if when we get to number 6, you invite Miss Buckingham to address committee for 3 minutes, that's fine. And again, when we get to item 7, if you ask Miss Buckingham to address the item before the officer report for 3 minutes, that's fine.
Yes, thank you. Any members' declarations of interest? None noted. Minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of November 2020. Are they agreed?
Chair, Councillor Henley has a hand raised.
Yeah, Councillor Henley.
Thank you, Chair. I have no issue with the accuracy, but on page, when the Children's Trust people came to talk to us, they confirmed that they had a full list of KPIs and they promised me that they would send it out. And once again, we've been promised something at this meeting and then not seen anything. So I haven't chased our officers on this time round, so that's probably on my fault for not having chased. But it would be good if we are going to be promised things in this meeting to then see them afterwards.
Chair,
Thank you,
Chair, I will ask Francesca to contact the relevant officer and ask them for them to be supplied. And I think it was to be distributed to all members of the committee, not just
It was.
Councillor Henley.
Thank you.
Yeah. So apart from, well, everybody's agreed that the minutes are accurate, and there is that one matter arising from the minutes that Paul Galt's going to look at. Is that agreed?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. So now, Chair's announcement is budget setting, and I'm very, very impressed by the forward from the leader and the chief executive, where they talk about sustainable green development in the heart of ambition of growth in Northamptonshire, growing for investment in tourism, leisure and green infrastructure. So green and the environment is all the way through the budget and through the new council. And I think that's very, very encouraging, especially when we've got our own climate change committee, task and finish group. We wrote a presentation earlier, and what we've been told is this is the most complicated budget setting process in the country. And looking at the budget, there are still so many unknowns that we all have to look at. And also, as members are aware, from the 7th of January, we're then looking at the housing revenue account that affects thousands of people in Northamptonshire. We're also looking at what the local government finance settlement is going to be, which is going to come out between the 14th and 17th of December. So there's so many unknowns with this budget. And also, I think there's a lot of hope that we're going to get a Brucey bonus of some sort, or a Boris bonus, with extra money coming into the local authority. That is, again, a big uncertainty. Looking at the budget setting, which we'll come on to a little bit later, I've listened to Victoria and I've listened to Mick Scrimshaw, the ex-chair of Scrutiny, and they have advised me that the way the county councils set their budget is a way forward. So I'll be raising that with you earlier on, how they scrutinise their budget. So I think it's important we scrutinise the budget somewhat the same as the county council have done recently, and I think it's important that we include the Lib Dems in on this. So moving on, we will now ask Lynn Buckingham to do a presentation. Sorry, Paul, is that right?
Yes, Lynn, right. If you don't mind, 3 minutes maximum, please.
Thank you very much. I hope that I don't take that long. Good evening, Chair. Thank you, and councillors and members of staff. Please excuse me. I always get a frog in my throat. Although I'm talking on item 6A, the draft budget, I'm focusing most on Appendix D, the draft harmonised fees and charges. The reason why I'm doing that is because although the fees and charges have been harmonised, the service certainly hasn't. So at the moment, what it doesn't say, although the fees have been harmonised, it doesn't say whether there are any concessions for the elderly or disabled as there has been before. There are differences in the services that are being provided by each of the councils. For example, what constitutes an item, the garden waste, 3 of our councils take garden waste into account, 1 doesn't. There's also the wee collection, which is by 1 council and not the other 3. So we don't know what service we're going to get on day 1. And it's just asking you to, as a committee, whether or not those little things that make the services more accessible, that we understand what service we're going to get for our money is sort of put out. And that's all I would like to ask on that. I understand that the budget setting itself is a mammoth task, especially one that you have to do, and I'm aware of that. And this may seem very minuscule, but at the same time, we as residents don't know what is happening. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Lane. There's not much chances we could give on that right now because it's still in the middle of processing, but we have been told things like what's happening on the street cleaning and cleansing and your bins being emptied will stay relatively the same from day 1, and hopefully we can keep them the same all the way through, but that's what we have been told, not to expect too many changes on day 1. But there's something that we will have to flush out during the budget process setting, so thank you for that. So now we're going on to the draft medium-term financial plan and budget 2021-22. Glenn Hammonds, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members, I'd just like to introduce the report to you ahead of your discussions on how you would like to go and about scrutinising this draft budget. The report in front of you this evening is the report that was considered by Shadow Executive on Monday evening. And the report sets out the first draft budget and also medium-term financial plan for Northamptonshire Council. The draft budget is due to be consulted on starting tomorrow and then for a period of 7 weeks up until the 29th of January. The process then will be for the responses from the consultation and also from the work that you do as overview and scrutiny. They will then be considered along with a final draft budget by Shadow Executive on the 10th of February, ahead of the final budget being considered by the Shadow Authority at its meeting on the 25th of February. The draft budget for Northamptonshire has been one of the most challenging and complex budgets to develop across the country for next year. Any normal local authority budgeting process is never easy, but for Northamptonshire, it's been developed at a time that we're in the midst of a global pandemic and the uncertainties that that brings, but also the fact in Northamptonshire, we are going through local government reform and creating a brand new council. So the approach that's been taken towards developing the budget that you've got in front of you this evening for scrutiny is set out on sections 6 to 12 of the report. But if I could just quickly summarise the approach that's been done. First of all, it has been to disaggregate the county council's budgets between North and West Northamptonshire. For the North proportion, we've then aggregated that with the district and borough baseline budgets. And from that, then developed the North Northamptonshire budget, taking into account the pressures, efficiencies and savings that are set out. It's particularly worth noting the pressures this year and into next year's budget in relation to COVID, which is quite a significant figure and incorporated into the budget projections, as well as the benefits that are realised out of the Future Northants Transformation Programme that I've been reporting to you at previous meetings. The North proportion of those benefits is reflected within that draft revenue budget. In addition, there are the harmonisation of proposals relating to council tax and also some fees and charges. As the chair alluded to earlier, at the time of speaking today and the publishing of this draft budget, we are still awaiting our final funding allocations from government. They are expected to be received week commencing the 14th of December. However, where possible, what we've attempted to do within the draft budget that you've got in front of you this evening is to estimate those government funding allocations where we can. So as you can appreciate, the draft budget, because of the reasons I've outlined, includes a greater than normal level of risk for a number of factors. There's COVID pressures, there's the volatility of adult social care and children's social care demand, and also the impacts of local government reform in Northamptonshire. The budget does include options and proposals about how to go about mitigating those risks through the inclusion of appropriate contingencies and also contributions to reserves as well. And they are in there to help manage those potential financial uncertainties that we face going forwards. Appendix A of the budget sets out the overall budget position. The budget includes just over £35 million worth of pressures and also £17 million worth of savings. The gap of £18 million at that point is then closed or reduced by the incorporation of a proposal to increase the level of council tax by 4.99%. That consists of two elements. First of all, a 1.99% increase, which is the maximum that can be done without triggering the referendum limit, and also a 3% increase as a result of the adult social care precept. In terms of closing the remaining gap of just under £10 million, we're obviously awaiting announcements from the local government finance settlement, which is due next week. And in addition to that, once we find out our final allocations, we are also continuing to develop further options and efficiencies in order to be able to close that budget position and produce a balanced budget by time the budget is to be approved in February. The plan is to provide an update on the draft budget to Shadow Executive on the 7th of January about the impact on that draft budget of that local government finance settlement. One of the bits we will need to do when that report is published is provide a further briefing for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I will pause at that point in terms of introducing the General Fund Revenue Budget and MTFP to see if there are any questions before I then go on to introduce the capital strategy and capital programme.
Thank you. Paul, can you see the hands? Any hands up, please? Any questions?
Oh yes, hang on. I've got Councillor Hakewell first, then Councillor Henley.
Thank you.
Thought Councillor Henley got there first.
Yes, but you swap positions on screen, so you're in the first box.
That's truly not fair. General point, if I draw attention to paragraph 2.11, sorry, literally, I was on a different paragraph. 2.11, members are reminded the County Council's Band D council tax level was the lowest in the country for a county council. I think it probably still is. The point that I would like to make there is that that paragraph appeared in county council budgets for as long as I've been on it, since 2013. And there is a basic problem in relation to Northamptonshire, that not only was it and is it on a low level, equally successive governments since 2000 have demanded greater than average housing development within our county. And it just doesn't work. You can't increase the amount of housing and the demand at the same time putting in austerity, which reduces the amount of revenue coming forward. So I just initially, and there are other questions later on, make the point that that paragraph could appear in any county council budget. The core problem we have of the 27 county councils and soon to be unitaries, we were down at the bottom historically. What I would like though is in that paragraph, perhaps from Glenn, halfway through, harmonised amount is a little one. I might have missed it, but I've desperately been trying to find where the little one points to from that point of view. And could I also ask that members of the committee, sometime after this meeting, have a, if you like, a graph or whatever it is, Chairman, which shows the relative positions of the counties from which that assumption that we're the lowest is. So, you know, just the 27 counties where Northamptonshire sits. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to ask the question.
Thank you. Adam?
Would you like me to respond there,
No,
Chair?
if you respond both of them to both of them, and then it's up to you, but that's what I thought we'd do, get two questions and then the answer to both. It's up to yourself. Adam?
Okay, yeah. So I get the fact that we have a lot of things that we're still waiting on from the national, but we still have a lot of things that we need to fix locally. Where we talk here about this, I think everyone hopefully recognises around this committee room that this isn't a finished article anywhere near. And I'm very concerned when I see in 618 on the balance sheet that it says further details will be presented as part of the final budget proposals. I really hope that's not the case in terms of that's the first time anybody will get to see that, because unless I'm mistaken, the county councils owe something in the region of 560 million in terms of liabilities, which need to be allocated. I know that work has been ongoing, but that will have implications for both new unitaries, and I'm sure that work is still having fund fights as we speak. Oh, hello. That's a very nice picture.
Yeah, I think one of our councillors has pressed his share button.
He got excited as I started talking about
Okay, I do apologise.
No worries, Greg. That's one way of distracting me. But no. So, and my linked follow question is that in 617 it talks about caretaker authority. I know that as part of the blueprint, the one or other may be the host rather than the provider of services for a period of time. Will the council who is the host receive the full amount of the budget required, or will it be split as per 612, on the theory that it'd just be useful to know if there's a share of the win, if there is a win, or a share of the risk, if there is a risk. It'd just be useful to know. Thank you.
Right,
I have other
Glenn,
questions,
could you
but I'm
answer?
conscious that
Yeah.
there'll be others who want to talk first.
Glenn, do you want to answer the two councillors, please?
I can do, yes. In terms of the first point from Councillor Hakewell, in terms of where the one refers to, certainly the copy of the report I'm looking at, it's right at the bottom of the page that paragraph is on, and it says the one is referring to the council tax harmonisation proposals that were reported to Shadow Executive on the 27th of August 2020.
Just for clarity, Glenn, we're talking about page 15 on my agenda, and it's a footnote, Councillor.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've not got the page numbers on my one. Sorry.
Okay.
And I think on your other point, Councillor Hakewell, regarding the graph, what we can certainly do is, as part of the whatever scrutiny sessions that you decide to set up this evening, we can certainly bring a graph, not just of where the county council sits, because obviously that's historic, but also where Northamptonshire as a council would sit in relation to other unitary authorities, which is certainly in the lower quartile. And in terms of Councillor Henley's questions, in terms of the reference to the ongoing work on the balance sheet, in terms of the disaggregation of the county council's balance sheet and the aggregation of the districts and boroughs, there was a report taken to the Shadow Executive on in August 2020, which set out the principles for that disaggregation, and also an indicative position about what it would look like if it was done on the 2018 accounts. Because there is still work going on to close down the accounts for the county council and some of the districts and boroughs, we don't have a latest position, which is what the wording in para 618 is referring to when it's talking about the ongoing work. But certainly you are right, we can't set a budget without understanding what the position is around the balance sheet. So, work is actively going on currently in order to shape that position so that we can factor it into our final budget positions and proposals that get brought forward. In terms of the question around how the budgets for the host and the lead authorities split, they are split and allocated to each council. So what would happen is, say for example, the North is a host authority for a particular service, or a lead authority. The budget would be split between North and West, but the West would then essentially contribute towards or pay their budget to the North to receive that service. One of the bits that is currently being developed at the moment are a series of service level agreements and governance arrangements to manage those hosted and lead authority services.
Okay, Chair. Councillor Lee, and then Councillor Henley wants to come back in again.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Lee first.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for mentioning the page number. And I'd like everyone to mention the page number, please. That makes it easier. Right, I would refer you to page 26.7.3. So 7.3, about the increased cost of mental health as one of the results of the impact of COVID-19. That is very well observed, and that should not be underestimated. At the moment, I don't believe that there is a lot of funding, if any. I even believe there's no funding at all for addiction services. And the need for that has exploded. At the moment, we rely on the voluntary sector, but I know because someone close to me is involved with that, there's an enormous need for those services. So do not underestimate that. So we think that it's 569,000 needed for the increased mental health costs. Well, can I now refer you to page, let me see. I'm referring to the environmental project, page 86, I beg your pardon, 86, 5.4. There is a baseline program totaling 54 million for a basket of different expenses, just to house the state highway schemes, and environmental projects are in there. But then when you turn to page 91, you notice that the environmental projects are actually, the figure quoted there is only 185,000, which is only 1/3 of what's been set aside for the mental health. So I want to make sure that sufficient money is set aside for environmental projects, because we see a dedication at the beginning of the budget that this budget will be assessed against plans for tackling the climate emergency. But I hope there are pots of money, and I'm seeking your reassurance that pots of money are being set aside for that when needed. Thank you.
Okay.
Adam. Councillor Henley.
Sorry, I thought the officer was going to speak first because I've got quite a detailed question. So,
Do you want to answer Councillor Lee's statement before Adam comes in then?
Yeah, I think in terms of Councillor Lee's, it probably was more of a statement than a question, but is possibly, it might be some of the areas that you wish to go into a little bit more depth on in terms of the scrutiny over the course of the next month.
Thank you. And Councillor Henley.
yeah, okay, thank you, Joe. Page 33, 10.8 and 10.9. I must admit, until I saw these papers, I hadn't paid too much attention to what the shadow exec were doing in August, and that's clearly my mistake. It seems that we've got ourselves a notional council tax now, which then becomes the baseline, which means that nobody actually, if you look at 10.9, nobody is actually paying the £1,460, and yet we then go to the 1532, which is the 4.999 recurring percentage. Based on the numbers in 10.9, it looks especially like Kettering will only see a 2.8% increase, Corby a 4% increase, but both Wellingborough and East Northampton would be over 6%. Now, I get that we're pushed, in order to maximise council tax income, you have to maximise the council tax increase. But given I've seen everything talking about a potential increase of 5%, this doesn't feel fully transparent based on this notional approach. Half the area would not recognise it. Am I right in thinking that currently this is only a draft approach and would need to be agreed as part of the process, because we haven't actually formally agreed? I don't believe the shadow exec have the power to decide as to how to set the council tax. Is that correct?
Ultimately, in terms of setting the level of council tax, that is something that the shadow authority only has the ability to do. I think probably just worth mentioning in relation to paras 10.8 and 10.9. Obviously, because we are coming together as a new authority, then there are different levels of council tax rates based on the current sovereign councils. So one of the bits that we do have to do at some point is harmonise those council tax levels, and there is statute that enables us to be able to do that. a position was reported on that the potential options around how we might want to harmonise to shadow executive in August, which is what's referred to in the report there. At that point, the steer that they gave in terms of developing the budget was to use this alternative notional amount, essentially an average of the existing council tax levels, in order to calculate the referendum principles for the new council. So that's the planning parameter that's been built into this this draft budget.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, a linked follow up, based on the fact that potentially we're asking East Northants residents to pay an extra £100 per year, are we realistic in the fact that we're only talking about reducing the collection rate from 98.5 to 98%? Because we could set it at £1 million, but if we can't collect it, we haven't got the money.
I think what you've identified there, Councillor Henley, is one of the risks that we face in terms of the collection fund. That's not the only risk on the collection fund over the coming 12 months.
Agreed.
Because I think the impact of COVID and the pandemic on both the economy and also on individuals is also another potential risk as far as collecting council tax and business rates go.
And the local council tax support that we're talking about next.
Yes.
I've got one final question, but it's a separate thing, so I'll let I know other councillors want to talk first, so I'll go back on mute.
Chair, we have Councillor Hakewell and then Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. On the same as Adam's point, which is 10.9, could we have the figure, which is the county council element, embedded within there? The paragraph says that it is within. I'd quite like to understand what the actual county council element is per resident that is embedded within. That doesn't have to be now, but can come along. With that little one, and going back to August, a member of the community reading these papers, we really ought to, in the consultation, have a précis or those papers available, because unless you go back to the 27th of August, you don't get the answer that Glenn has kindly put forward to us. So in some sense, we need to understand that harmonisation. And Chairman, you'll know that I did send a paper around to the shadow executive, and I've sent it around to members here, that there is a massive anomaly in Kettering Borough, where unlike the other three boroughs who have town and parish councils which precept and always have for many services which Kettering Borough have carried out for the towns and parishes in the borough. When you go through the 100 or so town and parish councils in Northamptonshire, you find a bit, as Adam has said, that, for example, there is almost an equal split in East Northants between a town like Oundle or Thrapston, between what East Northants levied, which is embedded in these figures in 10.9, and what Kettering have in the past levied, for example, Rothwell or Desborough. What worries me is that we've already seen the executive take away the election expenses for the towns and parishes in Kettering Borough and place them on the parish councils. Now, those are expenses which the parish councils in Kettering Borough continue to pay within their council tax, but are now having to precept individually around the 25 or so to pay election expenses next year. And the principle put within these papers was that that's only fair, because Corby, Wellingborough, East Northants have already been doing that since '74. What is not fair is that out of the harmonisation should come the 40 to 70,000, according to which you look at it, that the people and residents of Kettering Borough are currently continuing to pay within their council tax and getting that as a service from the borough council. And I've made this point since June, but I don't really think that those colleagues outside of Kettering who are on that task group understand that particular anomaly. But if we set that to one side, Chairman, that has been delegated down and precepts in Kettering are going to increase. If you take the same analogy as the unitary moves forward, you could say, well, we'll harmonise with Arundel, who pay for their grass cutting, street lights and many other services. And look there in Kettering Borough, they don't do that. It's embedded within the current precept and embedded now in the future one. What that could mean is that those in Kettering Borough will be continuing to pay in the harmonisation of council tax for all those services, and then they will be delegated down and will have to seek precepts to pay for that. So if it works one way, it can work the other way. So I think there is a massive issue here. And if you look at those precepts between the boroughs and the town and parish, no one has approached this particular issue. And what should have happened, and we did ask for it some months ago, is an audit of what the town and parish precepts pay for in relation to what the boroughs and districts pay for, so that there was not a massive inequity that the people in Kettering Borough will be paying a greater amount in the future. I've tried to make this point, and I've made it in my paper, but it is really important that we don't get double taxation all over the place, because Kettering since 1974 have done many of the services which the other three haven't. Thank you, Chairman. I'd quite like an answer to that, and how we're going to investigate that through scrutiny.
Glenn, do you want to come back on that, because it was quite detailed, and my own view is maybe it's something that we look at as part of the scrutiny review of the budget. That's for the committee to look at. Glenn.
Okay, I think there were three elements in terms of what Councillor Hapewell was saying. First of all, off the top of my head, unfortunately, I don't know what the NCC element of the council tax is, but we will come back to you on that. You were also talking about the harmonisation and being a bit more transparent through the consultation process. One of the bits that I can say is that the areas around harmonisation, they do form a number of questions within the consultation process. And within that, we've tried to get a simple explanation of a very complex subject down, but there are links to those other reports which do provide a little bit more information. So that is within there. And then the final point, which is, I suppose what you've highlighted there, Councillor Hapewell, in the differences between different levels of service in different areas. And I think that throughout the budget and the services that we find we provide in the new unitary, there are going to be, there have been historic decisions made in sovereign councils to approach things differently. So to harmonise things is one thing that we need to look at for sure. It's a case of we need to be thinking in some areas it's going to take more time to harmonise than others. So, for example, the budget that we've got in front of us this evening is proposing, to harmonise council tax. It's also got some proposals in there around harmonising fees and charges. The balance of service levels between the unitary council and also the towns and parish councils is another one of those harmonisation issues that we do need to address from a unitary council perspective. However, it's probably the sort of thing that is going to take time and in terms of the balance of those services. So I think it's certainly one that is recognised, but it's one of many harmonisation points. And essentially, we've got to create the new unitary first before we can start talking to towns and villages about how we might want this balance of services to be. And I'm sure that there are different towns and parishes might want different balances of services as well. So I can see it being quite a complex issue going forwards.
Through you, Chair, just to quickly come back, the way it is at the moment, the people of Thrapston and Oundle will be paying to subsidise grass cutting in Kettering Borough and a whole level of other services. My point, and I can't make it strongly enough, is that you can't harmonise the borough and district council taxes and then subsequently come back to look at it, because the people of Kettering will be continuing to double pay for those services. It should be done now, and I'm quite sure the other authorities will not warm to the idea that they are subsidising what's going on in Kettering Borough.
Thank you for that. Any other questions?
It's Councillor Perry and then Councillor Henley wishes to come back in.
Councillor Perry?
Yes, Chair. Could I just pull us back in, please? Because I feel that we're going all over the place and we're starting scrutiny before we've actually decided what we're going to scrutinise and how we're going to do it. We said we wanted to run it how we did at the county, which is when we decide what our priorities are. So things like 107 million, does that mean anything to anybody? That's adults. 59 million, that's children's. 59 million, that's highways. We really need to look at our strategy of scrutiny before we get into the granular detail. So I'm asking that we pull this back in and set our strategy up, please.
Yeah. Any further questions before we start looking at that? Because we have to.
Councillor Henley.
Yeah.
Yeah. I recognise what Councillor Perry just said, but the reality is I want to ask this question tonight before the consultation starts. So on page 63, the fees and charges, I was a bit puzzled. Is this, can someone confirm, are these the papers that are going out as part of the consultation?
Yes, they are. These are the published reports as well.
Right, because I looked at the I started by looking at the cremation fees, and I felt I needed to compare. When the Borough Council of Wellingborough used to do this, they would let you know what the previous fee was and what the percentage of increase was, and that then gave you a chance to review and sense check. I'm stunned that we've not done that. I recognise that in some cases we're having to move to a new world, but the fact is that it looks suspiciously like the Kettering crematorium fee is going to be raised by 4.7% against Wellingborough's 2.3% increase. But there's nothing in the paper to say that. That's me pulling out last year's fees and then writing and doing the maths on that. Is this really the best we can provide for our residents so they can understand as to how the fees and charges work? It doesn't feel like the best approach to me, if I'm honest.
Okay, I noticed Sean had his hand up there. He wanted to say something.
Yeah, just in response to that, Councillor Henley, we haven't really agreed the formatting of the fees and charges to show in a harmonised way for Northamptonshire. So as part of the consultation, what we've set up is links back to the old fees and charges so you can compare the previous ones for each council versus these new harmonised ones. This is purely just the ones that we've looked at as a group, as a budget task and finish group, as to which ones could be harmonised. So further work is being done in January and February on the whole schedule of fees and charges, including county councils as well.
But that won't be shared with the public. We're talking about potentially making these changes. The ones that we've got here, we're talking about going out to the public on now.
Yes.
But we don't tell them what it was before, just what it will be.
There's links back to each of the sovereign councils, so Kettering, Corby, East and Wellingborough's fees and charges schedules. It's got all of this year's charges, and this is the proposed harmonised ones for these areas.
It does. So the report we've got here isn't the right one then?
No, the report's right. The consultation is going to have all the links into the sovereign council's fees and charges lists.
Right. Okay. I think it'd be useful if we can see that as soon as it's available, please, because
tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you.
So now moving forward, we've still got some officer presentations. Who's next?
I was going to introduce probably very quickly the capital strategy and capital programme.
Yeah.
And I'll quickly do that. So the report that we've got here sets out the draft capital strategy and the draft capital programme for Northamptonshire, and was reported to Shadow Executive on Monday this week. The report is essentially the proposals for the capital programme and the capital strategy, and will be subject to the same 7-week consultation and approach in terms of consultation and consideration by yourselves at Scrutiny. Ahead of it then being considered, any feedback that you provide to Shadow Executive and Shadow Authority in February as part of the final approval process. The capital strategy sets out the key principles and also the framework for the Council's capital investment plans. The key principles are set out in paragraph 5.2 of the report. And also in there is the proposed governance process for the approval and development of new schemes into the programme, and also through their life cycle. That's set out in the strategy. The draft capital programme itself is just over £200 million in total over the course of the next 4 years, and consists of a baseline capital programme, which essentially are those live projects that have already been commenced by sovereign councils. That totals 54 million. We have a development pool, and these are those new schemes that are proposed to come forward over the course of the next 4 years. There are 37 of those, totaling 99 million. And then finally, there is the Housing Revenue Account capital programme, which is in relation to the Northamptonshire's housing stock, which is a total of 48 million. And again, Chair, happy to pause there and respond to any questions on part of the wider debate as needed.
And any questions, observations? Paul?
Nobody. Oh, Councillor Hakewell.
Yes, Chairman, there are other questions I have on the revenue. You've correctly wanted to go through the presentations. I assume we can come back on revenue budget questions immediately prior to setting our scrutiny. Is that okay? I don't want to miss that opportunity.
Chair, you're on mute.
Yeah, that's okay, Jim. But if you want to put that into the scrutiny, the task and finish group, then you're discussing it twice. So I'm happy with that. But we've got to keep it as quick as possible. Thank you.
I don't think, Chair, there are any questions at the moment on the capital report.
No. So moving forward, anything else the officers want to add?
Not at this point, Chair.
Yeah, okay. So Councillor Hakewell, there's something else you want to raise. If you do that, and then we'll start looking at the way forward.
Thank you for that, Mark. Looking at two things, really. One is I can't find anything that accumulates reserves or any confidence about the level of reserves that will come forward from the disaggregation and the aggregation. So where and when will reserves come forward? Following that swiftly on, in Appendix F, we have the 21-22, sorry, page number 76. I've got it, there we go, Ad, sorry, page 76. If you look at the budget and medium-term financial plan risks, and Chairman, this may be where we start thinking about scrutiny as well, if you look down the set of risks that are there, on numerous occasions, it says use of reserves, use of reserves. So my question on reserves is, and if I've missed it, forgive me, we don't have a very clear identification of what the reserves are likely to be for Northants and how much of them can be used. Although I do make the point that using reserves is unsustainable. And when you look at the savings we have to make over the years, use of reserves harks back to the county council situation. And of course, they ran out eventually. And we look like we're on a similar sort of trajectory. But just looking at the RAG ratings in the right-hand column on pages 76 and onwards, there are 11 red rated items there. There are 12 amber and there are 4 green. That's not the greatest start to any particular business plan going forward in that way. So I wanted to make that. I'd like to know where the reserves are being shown, and perhaps, Chairman, those risks are where scrutiny might start. Those are the core 2 questions. The one that I would like to ask is, in the finance report, it talked about levelling up, which I think is north-south. I'd just like to ask the question, are we north or are we south?
Glenn, can you respond, please?
Yes, in terms of the reserves position, Councillor Hakewell, that position, as I alluded to earlier, there is still further work being undertaken with regards to the balance sheet. That the reserves are part of the balance sheet and they're part of that further work that is being undertaken. We may be in a position to provide an update in early January. If not, it will almost certainly, well, it will certainly be part of the position that's going to be coming forward later in the budget process and before the budget gets agreed. In terms of the risk point, as I alluded to during my presentation on the revenue side, there are a number of risks that are there at the moment. And one of the bits we do need to make sure from a new council perspective is that we cover off those risks, and reserves are one of the ways in which we can mitigate those risks. There's an inextricable link between the two.
Yeah.
The risks are certainly high at the moment.
Through you, Chairman, a member of the public looking at this consultation can't make a proper decision as to whether it's a viable and safe budget if there's no issue about reserves. So it's meaningless.
Councillor, you keep coming in without putting your hand up, because you've got to stop that. And even we as members cannot guarantee this is a safe and legal budget because there's so many unknowns, as you're aware. So we're moving on now. Glenn, there is an issue. We have talked about a 7-week consultation exercise, but for our housing revenue account, and we have thousands of people in social housing in Corby and Kettering and all that. Could you explain the process for that, please, so people who may be watching on YouTube or whatever understand what's happening with the housing revenue accounts?
Yes, with the housing revenue account, there is work actively being undertaken in developing the housing revenue account for next year and over the medium term. And a report will be brought forward on the draft budget to the Shadow Executive on the 7th of January. And that will be followed with the consultation with the various tenant forums in both Corby and also in Kettering.
Thank you for that. And part of the Task and Finish group will have to look at how we have meaningful consultation with the people in social housing. So thank you for that. Moving on now, one thing that I didn't say at the beginning of the meeting is I think we have to put our thanks to all the officers that have worked under really, really difficult conditions and so many unknowns as well to put this budget forward. Normally, when we're looking at budgets as a scrutiny committee, we're looking at what the leading council have put forward and saying, look, we're not happy with the cuts here or the cuts there. This is a complete different budget, as we're aware of. So I think it's really important that we start our task and finish group as soon as possible. Victoria, do you want to come in on that, please?
Victoria, sorry, Councillor Perry, sorry. Yeah, you're on mute, Councillor Perry.
Sorry, I missed that. Mark, I was taking a call from the hospital. Really sorry. So I missed it.
Yeah. Councillor Perry, just wondering whether you want to come in on the way that we're looking at moving forward on the budget, please.
Yeah, so we want to, normally we would have a series of meetings, each one dedicated to one of the big directorates. We don't think that would be quite appropriate in this instance, but Mark and I have spoken to officers, and there is the resource for us to set up a task and finish group, which can choose then to focus on the, well, whatever it wants to focus on, but hopefully the big ticket items that will ensure that we're safe and legal on day one, because that's what we've got to remember as councillors. We have a duty to make sure that we deliver safe and legal. So there is going to be quite a piece of work for that scrutiny group to prioritise and not politicise, is what I would say, because that is what we're here to do. You know, we are scrutineers of the public purse. That is our job. We've got to ensure value, and we do that by looking at the budget in as much detail as possible. And this is just my opinion, but we really have to not get too distracted by the smaller non-essential items. So we have a statutory duty, and we have to start our focus on our statutory duty. That has to be the start of our focus. Some people might disagree with me, but what went wrong? Well, I think I know Jim sat in a number of scrutiny meetings with me at the council, and he knows how we can get lost down rabbit holes and miss huge lines in the budget. That margin of error is so slight that it means that we don't get to deliver the stuff we want to deliver on the non-statutory items. So the suggestion is that we set up a task and finish group. We open that up to the wider membership, like with the climate group, and that would also allow the Lib Dems to have some input into that, because they do have a lot of experience in looking at these budgets. And that was something Mark and I discussed with officers, the resources available. So Mark, over to you really, and see what the committee think.
Yeah, thanks for that. So it's looking at me chairing it with 4 Conservatives, 2 Labour, 1 Independent and 1 Liberal Democrat. That way, I think we can get a lot of experience on and what we're critical friends to the executive. We're not there to trip anybody up. They're there to work together in getting a safe and legal budget for the people of Northamptonshire. So I'd like to move that proposal. Is there a seconder to that? Does anybody want to vote against it? Because I can't see the hands, Paul.
I think I can't see anybody putting their hand up against that proposal, Chair.
Yeah. So that's carried then. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our groups and we'll decide who the members are. My own view is, I know that the Glenn was talking about looking at the first probably meeting in January. I think we have to probably meet sooner than that and look at terms of references. And I think I agree with Victoria. We're looking at statutory spend and some big items that we look at. We can't look at everything. We'll sting. So it's really important that we look at things that we can help with the budget setting process on. Any comments?
Chair, can I just for the record say that you proposed that and Councillor Rowley seconded it and it was all agreed.
Yes, you can. You can what you want, Paul. So Councillor Hakewell.
Yes, I totally agree. My view there is that the children's trust is pretty much fixed. That's already a contract for 5 years. So that percentage goes out almost anyway. There's not much we can do about that. Scrutiny traditionally ends up with something like Appendix F, which we've already touched on and Glenn's already answered some. Medium-term financial plan risks. In a sense, Scrutiny would normally come up with those risks and report them to the executive, and that's certainly what used to happen at the county council. Whether notice was taken was another issue. So my feeling there is that we already have an oven ready, if I dare use that formidable term, list of red areas. And if those red and amber don't come true, the budget won't come true. So my view is that as we set up Scrutiny, that Appendix F is where we should pick out the key items. And as Victoria has said, the ones where there's money, and scrutinise those.
Councillor Higg, you're talking about what the Task and Finish group will look at. You're, as Victoria said earlier, you're looking at putting things forward that can be discussed at the Task and Finish group on what we're going to prioritise, and hopefully you'll be part of that. And if you are, you'll have your say there. We've got a lot of things on the agenda. You've got the right to put that forward if you're on that Task and Finish group.
So what were you asking for just then? I thought that's what you were asking for.
No. What we've done is set up the Task and Finish group. It's not for us tonight to decide on what we're going to discuss. The first meeting of the Task and Finish group will look at the big items of what they want to discuss. We have to give that group the trust to do that. Or we could be discussing what we're going to put forward for the next 2 to 3 hours.
No. I wasn't intending that.
Yeah.
Chair,
okay.
Chair, Councillor Henley wants to come in at this point.
Thank you.
Councillor Henley.
Just a quick question. I didn't write down in time the composition. Can you repeat that, please? Because you went a bit quickly, Chair.
Sorry, it's 4 Conservative, 2 Labour, 1 Independent and 1 Liberal Democrat, chaired by myself as Chair of Scrutiny.
So is it, so just to clarify, it's where it says 2 Labour, that's yourself and 1 other?
Yes.
Fine, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
I think Councillor Lawman's trying to come in.
Sorry.
I was trying to find my hand, Chairman. Couldn't find it. Chairman, I think that Task and Finish group should be open to every single councillor on the shadow and not just to Scrutiny. Every councillor has got the right to scrutinise, and not just taking them from that. I think it should be a work group and be taken as such and then report back into you. But it's got to be from other people outside Scrutiny and not just the Scrutiny area.
Yeah.
The Scrutiny Committee is formed to scrutinise the council budgets and everything. I'm sure the Task and Finish group will listen to any comments or observations or anything that come from other councillors. Other councillors can be invited to come along and have their say, but we have to have a formalised group. If not, you could have, how many councillors? We've got 150 councillors sitting on the Task and Finish group. We just won't get through it. So we have to have a structured way forward.
Chairman, if I may come back, I'm not suggesting that you should have those representatives of 100 odd people. If you have, I can't remember what you said earlier on, 5 or 6 people on that Task and Finish group, it should not be chaired by the chairman of Scrutiny. It should be chaired by somebody else.
We've already made the decision on who's chairing it. The vote was taken, so we're now going to move forward. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to make any comments?
Sorry, Laura, the membership of that committee, the political groups can put forward any member of their group. They don't have to sit on Scrutiny. So, for example, from the Conservatives, someone like Councillor Graham Lawman, who's got a lot of experience on, would be really good. And I think that's what we're trying to encapsulate, is get that broader experience, so they can put forward people outside this committee.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Chair. Councillor Hakewell has raised his hand.
Just
Councillor
very
Hakewell.
quickly, Chair, you're saying the first task and finish group will be about deciding what to scrutinise, so we won't have any presentations on any of the meat of it until the second
Yes.
scrutiny. How many are we thinking of having then?
Well, that's what the task and finish group will have to look at. If I think you're asking us to have a long debate tonight on how we'll scrutinise it, what we'll do. We could be here forever, Jim. I don't know what other people's views are on this. Pogo.
Yeah, Chair,
your rights, not mine.
I think what was suggested is the first meeting probably before Christmas to set the scene, agree which areas you want to scrutinise in detail. And then realistically, you're probably looking at 3, maybe 4 meetings before you have to bring something back or get it in front of the executive. So, you know, there's a lot to be done in January. So I think you have to be mindful also of officer support, being able to provide that support for any more than that. So I think the proposal was first meeting before Christmas, set the scene, agree the priorities, and that gives Glenn and his colleagues and other officers the opportunity to plan for coming to the group. And I would also say we'll get an email out to the group leaders tomorrow asking for those nominations to come in, and given some previous experience, I would suggest anybody knocks on their group leader's door as soon as possible after this meeting to say you want your name to go into the hat.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul.
Councillor Perry wishes to come in.
Yep.
Oh, no, she didn't. No, she didn't. Okay.
Okay. So moving forward, anything else on the item 6, the draft medium-term financial plan?
No, Chair. I mean, the recommendations in the report were meant for the executive. So you've established what you're going to do with the reports. I think that suffices for tonight, Chair. Yeah.
So now we're going on to item 7, local council tax support scheme. Lucy.
Sorry, Chair. Before my colleague Lucy comes in,
you've got Lynn Buckingham. Sorry, apologise.
Who's been sat quietly in the corner. I'll invite Lynn Buckingham. Lynn, you have 3 minutes, and after you finish your contribution this time, I will put you back in the waiting room, and you can obviously follow the meeting on YouTube after that.
Not a problem at all. Thank you. Hopefully, I won't take the 3 minutes. I just want to raise three items highlighted. The first is the Armed Forces Covenant. The West Northamptonshire is keeping the discretion to allow war widows to receive a greater, have a greater contribution instead of being penalised. The second is they keep going on about not having a discretionary fund for the local council tax support scheme. There needs to be a safety net, even with housing benefit, where they've taken a number of things into account. They also have a discretionary pot of money. So if there is real hardship, people can access that. Councillor Lee this evening has already talked about the impact of one thing on another when she talked about mental health issues and COVID crisis. By taking off child support, family support from the benefits, there will be a impact on child services. You will have already seen that with domestic violence through COVID, mental health through COVID. there needs to be a needs assessment on the child. Where are these children going to get food from? You need to have in place a safety net, because, you know, just disregarding children means that they will need feeding somewhere. So I'm very passionate about making sure that there are safety nets in place. Most of these benefits are paid to working families, and the discretionary fund needs to be in there. It shouldn't just be about getting advice. Well, you know yourselves from the problems that the county councils had, that if there isn't any money in the pot, there isn't any money in the pot. So it's just a plea for, please can we have a safety net? Please can you do your child poverty needs assessment? Please can you understand that there is an impact on children and families in the future? Thank you. I apologise for being very passionate about this, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for that, Linda. I think that I don't think there's anything you said there that anybody could disagree with. So, anybody want to make any comments on Lynn's, or it's now on to the board?
You don't make comment. Well, you can draw a reference to it, but I will now invite. I will now put Lynn in the waiting room. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Lynn.
Okay, Chair. Now, so apologies to my colleague Lucy, waiting to speak.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. You may recall on the 8th of October, a report was presented to the committee detailing the proposed Northamptonshire Council Tax Support Scheme that was going out for consultation. During the committee, it was requested that the outcome of the consultation was presented to the committee prior to the shadow executive making a decision on the scheme at their meeting of on the 7th of January. So just to recap on the consultation, an 8-week consultation did run for the period 5th of October to the 30th of November. And we did an 8-week consultation. That was more than the statutory 6 weeks required, because the task and finish group recognised that the proposed changes could have a significant impact on vulnerable people, and therefore wanted to do more consultation than was actually required. And also members of this Overview and Scrutiny Committee also fully supported the longer consultation period. The consultation was an online survey and open to all residents, stakeholders and people representing organisations. And it was also available in other formats. That was also requested by the committee. And there's a list there of 3.2.3 of how the consultation was communicated and promoted. And one of the items was obviously a recommendation from the committee as well. And we sent a letter out to all current working age council tax support recipients, advising them of the consultation. And along with that letter, we sent an information sheet. And this actually detailed all the proposals and went for them individually. So if they were an East Northampton resident, it would let them know how each of the changes would affect them, you know, with regards to the current scheme that was being operated in their area. And this was done for all of the 4 sovereign councils. And members were also provided with a copy of that letter and the information sheets as well. Now, the analysis of the consultation responses can be found at Appendix 1, and I'll go through that shortly. Also during the committee, we mentioned that at present, when we did the calculations, the cost of the council tax support scheme was £15.7 million. And there's about 18,500 council tax support recipients. We have done further analysis because in June, we didn't know how things were going to change in the future with COVID. At that point, we also thought that the scheme to support, the furlough scheme was going to end at the end of October, but that's actually been extended through to March now. So we've done some analysis on caseloads and expenditure, and our caseloads reduced slightly by about 270 customers across all 4 district and boroughs. And the expenditure's gone down at the moment to about £140,000. So it's still not anywhere near our pre-COVID caseload figures. And you know, we're not sure how that may change in the future. It's sort of guesswork at the moment because of we don't know what's to come. So it's quite hard to predict. Going on to the analysis of the consultation results now, we actually had 409 survey responses, and for this sort of consultation, that is actually quite good, and I think that shows that we did try and reach out to as many people as possible. Within the consultation results, we've broken it down into demography, levels of support for each proposal. Because the consultation only closed on the 30th of November, and we needed to get some analysis out to you, we only had about 3 days to pull anything together. So what we've actually done, and what I requested, is for our team to home in on proposal 1, and that's the proposal with how much contribution the customers proposing that they pay. And we're given all the cross-tab analysis on that and all the breakdown on that for you. What we have done, while that's, we've also, for all the other 6 responses, we're pulling together the same level of detail, although it's not included in this report. And I found out at 5 o'clock tonight that that's actually been completed now. So I'll be checking through that tomorrow. And hopefully by the close of play tomorrow, I'll be able to give you the full analysis, detailed analysis for all 7 proposals, not just proposal 1. So that should give you, you know, some time to pull your responses together, what you want to put forward to Shadow Exec for them to consider. So just running through the consultation responses, like I said, 409 survey responses. We had 6 from organisations that were online, and then 2 letters from organisations as well. And that was across the board. They represented all of Northamptonshire Council, so it wasn't just one particular area. The people that responded, we did ask which local authority do they currently live in, and we had the most responses from Corby and East Northants, as you'll see on page 2. And then we asked customers if they were currently receiving council tax support or not, and 40% were in receipt of council tax support and 54% were not in receipt of council tax support, and 20 preferred not to say. So with the overview, so there were more females than males that responded to the survey. With regards to age, as you would imagine, there's a higher amount in the working age bracket. And there was 33% with a disability and 57% with no disability. During the survey, we asked people whether they strongly agreed, tend to agreed, neither agreed nor disagree, or tend to disagree or strongly disagree. And for the purpose of the pie charts, the disagree ones have been shaded in red, and the agreed ones have been shaded in green. So the first proposal regarding the percentage, the proposed percentage of 25%, there was 47% that were in agreement and 39% that disagreed, and out of those 11% didn't have an opinion. The next one was the removal of the family premium when assessing new claims to council tax support. Again, 50% agreed and 21% disagreed with that proposal. Proposal 3 was limiting the allowance to 2 dependent children, and this was for children that were born on or after the April 2017. On this, 55% agreed and 26% disagreed. Proposal 4, regarding backdating benefit, again, 48% agreed with limiting backdating and 32% disagreed. Proposal 5 68% agreed with limiting a temporary absence outside of the UK to 4 weeks, and 15% disagreed with that. Proposal 6 was regarding the severe disability premium. 41% agreed with that and 34% disagreed. And proposal 7 about employment and support allowance, 44% with that, 20% disagreed. Just wanted to pick up here about war pensions. And the reason we didn't include that in the consultation is because of as a part of the task and finish group, we looked at all the things that we had in common within our schemes and all the things that were different. And we only decided to look at the things where we were different. So with regards to war pensions and ignoring the income that people receive from war pensions or war widow pensions, we all had the same scheme. We all ignored that income in full when calculating council tax support. So we didn't feel we needed to do a consultation on it because we all agreed, and that's something, you know, we're definitely going to keep. So that's why it hasn't been highlighted. So the West chose to consult on that, and that's up to them, but we decided not to because we're always going to keep it. We were harmonised already, so there's no point in changing. So I just wanted to clear that. And with the shadow exec report goes, I'll make that clear in that report as well, just in case people think that, you know, we haven't done that. Just going on to proposal 1 now, we've done a breakdown of if people are in receipt of council tax support and the extent of whether they agree with the proposal or not. So those who are in receipt of council tax support, they disagree with the proposal 11% more than those who are not in receipt of council tax support. And moving on to the area in which you live and how did that affect your views. Obviously, Corby residents were most in disagreement with proposal 1, and this is because obviously the increase would be more significant to them than the other district and boroughs. And then gender didn't really have any difference, whether in male or female, to how people responded. And obviously age, working age people disagreed more because it would affect them more. And with the pensionable age people, because they're protected from any changes, that's why it's likely that that's why they were in agreement with the proposals. And obviously disability, the chart indicates there's a bigger portion of those who answered yes to having a disability who disagreed with the proposals. Now, there's a summary of the comments on the proposals, and those that strongly agree were mainly from respondents because they felt that they're already paying more than they're actually paying more than the 25% anyway. So of course they're going to, you know, agree with this proposal. Going on to the ones that disagreed, it's actually, some of them weren't actually disagreeing with the 25% being too high. They were disagreeing because they thought it should be more, which was unusual to see. Well, we have had that in the past actually, that people feel that, you know, if they've been paying 45%, for example, that actually maybe others should pay higher to catch up. I won't go into all the other comments because they've been there for you to read, but what we thought for transparency, it would be good to put all the comments on there for you to read so you could see where people were coming from. And we will do this with all the proposals as well. We'll do the same format for all of those, which I should be able to get out to you tomorrow. Just picking up on the discretionary fund element, the speaker was correct. There is a discretionary fund for housing benefit to help people with shortfalls in their rent. This is actually fully subsidised from the Department for Work and Pensions, though, so it doesn't actually come out of the council's own fund. So whereas a council tax support hardship fund would come out of the council's own fund. So this hasn't been ruled out and it can be considered, and that's something that the shadow exec would need to look at when they decide on the scheme, whether they want to introduce that in January. So like I said, this report was for information purposes only, so that you've got all the analysis back and you can put any of your recommendations or suggestions to shadow exec before they make their decision at the beginning of January. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you for that for that very, very detailed report. And I was encouraged that 60% of the Corby people that were surveyed said they weren't happy with item 1, and I think that's going to come across time and time again. So this is a report to note, but we are allowed to put some comments to the cabinet. So any comments on this report?
Chair, Councillor Lawman has her blue hand raised.
Yeah, not a red hand. Okay, Councillor Lawman.
Really not a red hand, Councillor Pengilly. With regards to the Appendix 1, I'm looking at Proposal 6, and I'm a little bit curious why, for instance, the strongly agree and tend to agree are being put together, arriving at about 41% of respondents agreeing with the proposal to remove the entitlement to the severe disability premium where a person is paid universal credit, the carer's element to look after them. Because when I take then, they tend to agree, strongly agree, and even if I put in either the don't knows or the neither agree or not agree, I think on a balance of probability, that would be a fair assessment to put them together. I would come to a higher result that people are actually disagreeing with that element. Perhaps the officer could explain the background of the severe disability premium and the carers element when that has been removed. And my second point is it's more a statement than a question. I'm very relieved that the war pension element is actually included. Perhaps it would have been better to make it clear that that was included in the consultation, because Northamptonshire as a whole has a huge retired Army and RAF base, based on the Pioneer or what was the Pioneer Corps and so on in Northampton, and people are resident here, they have retired here, and a lot of Army widows, as usually is, more Army widows than widowers, are in our Northamptonshire area. So thank you for that, but perhaps it could have been worded slightly different. So if I could have an answer on the Appendix 1, please, Proposal 6 and the background on the severe disability premium. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Lucy. Can you respond to that, please?
I can, yeah, and I appreciate it's quite a complex situation, this one. So not all people who are getting carers allowance, someone getting carers allowance for them is going to be affected by this. So if a current council tax support customer is either receiving universal credit, income support, job seekers allowance income based, or employment and support allowance, then they will not be affected by the proposed change. If the person receiving care allowance for them is not receiving universal credits, they're just getting what we call the old scheme carers allowance, then they won't be affected by this change either. The only time they'll be affected by this change is if the person is getting the universal carers allowance premium for looking after them. So this means that the severe disability premium will no longer be awarded. So in the people in the other two circumstances that I've just said, they don't actually get the severe disability premium because they were always under the old scheme. What happened is when universal credit was introduced for carers, they didn't shut off that loophole for the severe disability premium. So the customer should never have been should be getting it to start with, so it mirrors the people who are getting the old scheme carers allowance. So what I've actually done, I've spoken to Corby Council to see, how many people would actually be affected by this, and they've had nobody phone up about this one, and they can't find any on their caseload either, because it is a very rare occurrence, but it is a loophole in the regulations that does need to be closed off. So this one, it doesn't affect people who are getting traditional carers allowance because the people they look after wouldn't have been getting that premium anyway. So does that help explain that it is very, all the other 3 districts and boroughs don't include, have already included that in their scheme, so none of the residents there will be affected. So it would just be Corby, but speaking to Corby, they can't track anybody that would be affected by that change. It's just one of those loopholes in the regulations that we did have to change off. But the whole idea is someone shouldn't get a severe disability premium if they've either got somebody living in the property as a non-dependent with them, or if they're getting carers allowance. It's just Universal Credit didn't pick up on that when it was introduced. So it was sort of an error in the scheme when it was first introduced.
Thank you for that, Lucy. Anybody else with any questions? Paul, any hands?
Yeah, Councillor Hakewell next.
This really is a question for Mark Dickinson, who in his slides, there was a line, local council tax support. And I thought this was the right place to mention that. You'll no doubt have picked that up too, Chairman. What is that line, local council tax support, in the original slides, and how does it relate to this particular item? And I would just agree with the Chairman, brilliant amount of analysis in the breakneck speed. So thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
If I may, Chair, in the presentation that I provided earlier, when we were referring to local council tax support, that was some narrative that the government had provided around the additional funding that we would receive. What we had anticipated that could be initially used for was for the hardship fund, which would be a repeat of what happened in 2021, whereby those in receipt of council tax support received £150. However, that wasn't the purpose of this money being awarded. It's additional funding for local authorities themselves, and not one that's going to be passported on to the taxpayer. Does that answer the question, Councillor Hakewell?
So what is that fund then?
It's just what the government have termed the fund, Councillor Hakewell. That's the name they've given to it. But in essence, it's additional money that's coming direct to the local authority to support the authority through COVID, rather than money being paid direct to the taxpayer.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other, Paul?
Councillor Henley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you, Paul, I suppose, but I think I would agree with I think Councillor Lorman and others in the fact that I'm grateful to hear about the war pensions. Even Kettering wouldn't go that far, so I guess we've found their limit on that, so that's pleasing just before Christmas. I remember there was conversations before we went out to consultation about whether it was legal on only offering one option. I would welcome, because we've got very great detail on what we've been asking them, but we only asked them the one question as to whether they're happy with 25% or not whether whether we wanted to offer them, say, we gave them a range of, if we'd given them a range of 10%, 20%, 25%, 30%, then it would have been very interesting to see as to where those numbers would have gone. I never did see an answer on the legality of offering one option. It'd be useful if I could get an answer on that, please.
Yes, we did get legal advice on that, and it was that we can go out to consult on our proposed scheme. So our proposed scheme was the 25%, and then the other six proposals as well. What it does say, though, although that is our proposed scheme, we don't have to sort of stick with that scheme either way. If anything comes out of the consultation that makes us think, oh, we didn't go out to consultation on a discretionary scheme, but actually we think that's a good idea, we can still put that to shadow exec for them to make a decision. Or if we say that from the consultation responses that have come back, there is a percentage of people that actually strongly disagree, and these are the reasons why, we could then reduce the percentage that we propose as well. So although we go out on our proposed scheme, strict as to either sort of that's it. It is following the consultation that Shadow Exec will look at those responses with your suggestions as well, and decide whether that is the correct scheme to go with, or whether we need to think about something different.
The challenge is, sorry, Chair, if I can just follow up on
Adam,
that.
I was going to let you come back in on that.
Thank you. The challenge is, I don't believe there's enough ammunition in the gun of the Shadow Exec for them to make a change, even if they so desired, because we haven't really asked for public as to what they felt on this. Now, I get we only chose. I'm grateful that we're legal. Safe and legal, as always, is our new minimum and watchword. But the fact is, we haven't really asked the public, what do we want? What do you want? It's here's, do you accept 25%? And that's, we've got some great detail on that, and we've got some fabulous detail on the response to the 25%, but not enough to tell. I don't believe it'll be enough for anybody to change their mind based on that. I realise that's more of a statement than a question. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Chair. There's Councillor Hakewell next.
I had a discourse, and Adam has now reminded me of that. In Dorset, there was a government part of the structural change order which would have allowed Dorset to continue with their existing schemes, which would have allowed Corby to carry on with its existing scheme. I know, Lisa, we did have a dialogue on that. How is that going? Is that still possible? And listening to Lucy's point, there could be an opportunity for the executive to come to a conclusion to say, we will keep the existing schemes in the 4 authorities, but harmonise it over 1, 2, 3 years of the new executive, and not do it in the same brush. How is that going? Can we get the similar Dorset dispensation? And before you tell me, I know Dorset didn't take it up, but I don't know what their diverse values were.
Yeah, just to confirm on that, there is 2 elements to that. One, MHCLG have confirmed that we could take up to 24 months to implement a harmonised scheme, only if it's not practical to do so. Now, because we've consulted and we've got everything ready for Shadow Exec to make a decision, officers believe that we have got plenty of time to actually implement the scheme for when we do annual billing at the end of February, beginning of March. The second thing is do we want to implement a Northampton scheme that has different rates applicable depending on the area in which you live, such as Corby only raising to 15% in the scheme, Kettering coming down to 35%. But if I bring Adele in here, she'll be able to tell you the risks that are associated with that, because I think we'd be quite open to challenges on equalities with regards to that. But I can let Adele explain that.
Adele, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the issue with it is about equalities. So I think that, as Lucy said, we could delay it. However, we do have the issue about whether it's practicable. And I think we've proven now that it is practicable to harmonise. So I think the issue is that from an equalities perspective, it's really difficult to envisage a situation where the decision to harmonise won't result in some inequality throughout Northants. So generally speaking, if we've got 2 people living in the same area, which is in Northants, they've got the same level of hardship, they've got the same amount of relief, and one's got more relief and one's not, then I think we would be quite open to challenge in terms of discrimination. So I think that is a real challenge for us in terms of that. And I think it does put the authority at risk if we weren't to harmonise when we're able to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Perry wishes to come in.
Yeah. Before Councillor Perry comes in, on what was said by the officer there, I think that if we show that we're doing this over a number of years, then there couldn't be a challenge. That we're not doing it all in one. We're a brand new council, and I would hope that alternative view is given to the cabinet, they probably won't take it out, but I think it should be explained to them that that is another view forward, and I think we'd all want that to be done. So thank you. Councillor Perry.
That leads in quite nicely, Chair, to what I was going to say, because obviously a lot of work's gone into this, but you say the Cabinet's got everything to make a decision. It hasn't quite yet, because it hasn't got the official comment from Scrutiny. And I think what we need to agree to do now is to put down a consensus if we can get a consensus. We might not be able to, but our views and our feedback, and suggest that somebody goes along to the executive and presents the feedback from Scrutiny to them. Again, it's something that is standard at the county. Scrutiny, Councillor Scrimshaw would always go to Scrutiny prior to that, Councillor Hakewell, and just present a report from Scrutiny on what their findings were. And that, as Mark said, isn't always a criticism. It's just findings, it's suggestions, and it might even be support. So what I'd like to propose is that we pull together the thoughts and the feedback that you've all given today, and put that forward to Scrutiny in a format, and somebody, either Mark or myself, goes along and presents that at the next, not cabinet, sorry, executive meeting. But when this is actually going to executive, that we go along and just present back what our findings are officially.
Okay, how can that be drawn up, Paul? I'm asking your view on this.
Well, I think you've got to hopefully agree at least 2 or 3 perhaps key points that you want to make. I mean, just summarising from the debate and not prejudging what the view of all the members are. I mean, one is whether there should be some sort of, I mean, bear in mind, I don't fully understand this myself, some sort of discretionary fund set up, which there currently isn't, and whether members of this committee feel that there should be, which is not obviously an open budget. It's a fund with a fixed amount set aside. I'm thinking back to the committee's previous discussions on this when it first came around. So there's one potential proposal that's come up in discussion. Obviously, it's up to the committee to decide if they want to put that forward formally. Councillor Perry wishes to come in again, Chair. Don't know if it's
yeah, just on this, if we get some thoughts together and pulls those together, then the committee can delegate to the chair and the vice chair to agree that report after the meeting and put it forward. And because we're cross-party, hopefully we'd be happy to do that. I will comment on the discretionary fund. I have concerns about discretionary fund if I don't know where the money is going to come from, because we could wish for a lot of things. But what we did ask for was for more clarity on the support that is available for people who are struggling, because we know that all the individual boroughs and districts have some kind of support system, but we don't know what that looks like. And there was just a very small paragraph saying we'll give them some help with budgeting, and we felt that that wasn't sufficient, and we wanted to know what the package of support looked like. We still haven't had that. I'm just conscious of that.
Any officers welcome on that? Lucy?
Yeah, what we can do is we can pull together what we've got in place for money and debt advice at the moment, because like you say, as districts and boroughs, we all operate slightly different. So we have got a lot of partners that we work with, so we can provide you with you know, the structures within each district and borough at the moment. And we have requested that, you know, all those agreements are rolled over into the new unitary until we get to look into it further. So that won't be taken away come the 1st of April. That will continue with the support that we've currently got through advice agencies and such.
So just, just Chair, can I just follow on with that?
Yeah, of course.
At the moment, there's no pulling together of centralised support or a vision of what that would look like or what it could look like. It's going to be, we stay with what we've got individually. And
yeah,
then
Yeah, and we have actually within the revenues and benefits unitary work stream, that is one of our work streams that we're looking at. So we are pulling all that information together at the moment. It's just that we've rolled things on to make sure that while we're working on that, we don't, lose sight, our customers don't lose out while we're actually working on it. They'll still continue to get the same level of support. But what we're looking to do is pull all that together and enhance the support that we get in a more, collective approach.
Okay, anybody else want to comment before we move?
Councillor Lee had her hand up, but do you wish to come in, Councillor Lee? You had your hand up, but it's
yes.
Sorry, you've muted, Chair. Councillor Lee's muted.
I wanted to express my support for a voluntary fund. Okay, we don't know where the money's going to come from. Tell it to people who are going to the food bank. Even a small fund can make some change, because we should not underestimate the hardship that people will be going through in the next few years. It's quite a drastic change for people in Corby. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree, and my own view is I don't want the 25%, but I'm sure that's going to go through, and I'd want Corby to stay the same.
Chair, Councillor Hakewell wishes to come in.
Yeah, I do apologise for coming back, but this issue of allowing a period, as the chairman said, 12, 24 months, the point that Adele made that it would be subject to challenge, the Dorset, if I can call it that, option, that Dorset option was embedded in a structural change order from government. So are we saying that government were putting a structural change order in place that could have allowed Dorset to go into a situation where it was subject to challenge? My point, Chairman, and you've made that point, is that people in Corby will fall off a cliff on April the 1st. And in almost everything in my years on the council, which is more than 30 now, when things like poll tax, council tax came in, there was always a smoothing which protected people from a significant drop. You could also say that it would be unfair for people in Kettering who currently have to pay 45% to drop to 25. They have an unfair benefit over people in Corby. So in answer to Councillor Perry's point about what we might write to the executive, I would still like to see whether or not, and I know conversations are ongoing with government, we could have at least a 24-month smoothing of this policy without being subject to whatever you call it, subject to challenge, because it really is a heck of a drop, isn't it, for people in Corby? And remembering that a kind society is one which looks after those which are least well off. Therefore, in that report, I would like to think that officers can still go to government, can still say, can we do it, irrespective of the consultation we've done. I'd really like that to be in the report that Councillor Perry has said, so that the executive might have before it a 2-year smoothing policy, which would not be subject to challenge.
And it's strange when you look at the consultation, 75% of people in Kettering thought this was a great thing, and 60% of Corby didn't think so. So it just shows you finance matters. Anybody else? I agree with you, Jim. Anybody else?
There's nobody else wishing to come in, Chair, but I'm still not absolutely certain what you...
Well, what we're doing is...
Oh, sorry, sorry, Chair. Councillor Perry wishes to come in.
Yeah, so I realise, Paul, this puts you in a difficult position. So we're trying to get a consensus. Does anybody else have a view on what we put forward to the executive? Jim's come in with something that sits in the middle, I think, of, but I've given my view. Does anybody else have an opinion on that? Because this will be what goes to the executive and is presented to the executive, will be on your behalf. And we're quite happy to give a spiked profile report, as it were, if there's any disagreement.
For you, Chair, I'm trying to depth charge that particular issue of a smoothing period.
No, I agree with that. I've made that clear. Nobody else has said they don't agree with it.
Apart from me.
So what?
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Rowley wants to come in. I don't know if he.
Yeah. All we're doing is giving options to the cabinet. That's it, or the executive. Councillor Rowley, sorry.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Perry and what Adele has said, that we need to make sure we're safe and legal. I appreciate the people of Corby will be paying more, but we've done a survey now, so the risk of challenge is greater. And Dorset or whatever, we're looking at ourselves. I can't see delaying it for 24 months will stand scrutiny if it got challenged.
So let's look at this. When we talk about qualities, what we've been told by Adele is that we have to ensure that we do this sort of immediately because we could be challenged. If you live in Corby, maybe the support you get from other bodies, we've said that throughout the Northamptonshire is different, won't be the same. So the equalities of support is different. Why can that not be challenged then? Because if the support there's more support in Wellingborough for people that are going to be hit, and it's Corby that's going to be hit the worst, and the less support there. So let's talk about equalities, and the equalities is something else that can be challenged on this end, can it?
And through you, Chairman, we can say and do what we wish.
Yeah.
Chair, I would make the point. Well, Councillor Henley's seeking to come in, but before he does, I would make the point that obviously it would be nice if this committee can come up with one or two bullet points that the chair can go forward. But any member of this committee, indeed any member, can obviously make representations to the shadow executive in relation to what they feel on the scheme. You know, I don't want to, you know, obviously it'd be nice to get a consensus by committee, but I mean, even if it's a case of these two, the chair being able to say, okay, we discussed it, and these two issues, without saying that the committee fully supported them, but these two issues came up as potential options, you know, without necessarily saying everybody on screen tonight actually supported them.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Councillor Henley wished to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just to correct Councillor Rowley first, it's not just the people of Corby who'll be paying more, it's everybody but Kettering who'll be paying more. So that's East Northants as well, and that's Wellingborough. Now, I recognise it's only going from 20% to 25% for those two areas. That's still more at a time when people don't have this money and the financial situation in the area has not got better over the last year. It's going to get worse. That's one of the reasons why it's one of the many reasons why the collection rate is being proposed to drop down from 98.5 to 98. If I'm honest, I think that's still quite ambitious because based on everything we've heard tonight, I'll be stunned if everyone can suddenly pay this much more money. I'm disturbed. We have a significant amount of people coming into this proposal who are disabled, and they are the people who will be suffering the most in this process. So I would have said that a phased approach is the best approach, but we didn't ask people that, which is why we would have to then basically come up with our own proposals now, and we don't actually know if the public vote with us or not on these matters. And that's my frustration. I get the fact we're legal in going out on one item, but I think it would have been more helpful had we gone out on a couple of options, including one which would have been phased implementation over 2 years. It's interesting that the council tax support has to be phased over 2 years, but the council tax itself doesn't have to be phased for 8 years. That doesn't make much sense to me, if I'm honest. But I guess that's part of the process. So I think we're struggling to get an agreement because we don't have an agreement.
Yeah,
but I do agree though with Councillor Hakewill in the fact that I don't think we've gone far enough yet to try and alleviate the pressures on our residents, and it's not just Corby.
So moving forward then, if myself and Victoria meet up and look at a form of words that we'll share with the committee and see if everybody agrees on it and take to the executive. Is that okay?
Yeah, Councillor Perry wished to come in, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, so
Councillor Perry?
just so to assure you, Mark and I will come to an agreement and the views of the committee will be put across.
Yeah.
Do you really think Mark's going to let me railroad him into putting what I think? Can I just assure you he won't. But I can say there's been many occasions, and those that know Councillor Stanborough over in Corby, our Lib Dem colleague, when we've sat on scrutiny at NCC, and he's like said, well, you all think that, I'll have to go along with it, but I can tell you now I'm going to be shouting about it at full council, or he'll be bring it up again. So I think the point that Paul made is that there's always plenty of opportunities for us all to get our personal view across at executive, at scrutiny, at full council meetings. And we'll just try and put forward the view. I think there is a general consensus that we're worried about the people's affordability, and we would like to make sure that they're supported in the best way possible. How that support looks and how we want that support to look might differ. But I think that there is a consensus there if we look closely at what we've all said. So I think if you're happy with Mark and I to battle that out.
Yeah.
We're taking viewers.
Okay. Any other comments on this local council tax support scheme? No. Thank you everybody for that. Thank you, Lucy. We're now going on to the programme status.
Thank you, Chair. And if you can move to the first slide, Ben. The first one with the RAG rating on, please. We move down to the next slide and the next one. Thank you. So members, you will be aware that we come monthly with the programme status to give you the update on where we are with the overall key elements of the programme that are getting us to, as we've referred to tonight, safe and legal to the 1st of April for the disaggregation of Northamptonshire County Council and the beginning of the North and West. So you will see the programme status there in front of you shows 3 ambers. There were 3 ambers at last meeting, but that has changed in that finance has moved to amber, and adults, which was amber before, has now moved to green. We did talk about finance at the last meeting because we indicated that this would be moving towards amber, and some of the issues which have been addressed actually earlier in the budget are highlighted here, in that one, there's a heavy reliance during this what Glenn has referred to as very complex budget setting on SME subject matter experts that are working hard to put this budget forward. But also the particular reasoning here is also that there are concerns that have emerged around that external audit and the fact those external audits have not yet been completed, and the impact, as we've talked about earlier, on the Sovereign Council's financial close down position. I think we talked about that, and we referred to how we're making assumptions based on 2018 figures in terms of some of that disaggregation and the impact on that opening position for both of the unitary councils. Clearly we're concerned here for the North, but this is an impact on both of those unitary councils. So I just wanted to point that out. Children's is still in the amber, I think, and its estimated direction of travel for amber. Everybody will be aware that the Children's Trust did go live. However, there is still a stabilisation piece where we're working through. We're also overseeing the second phase of that programme and wanted to be ensured that those projected savings and those mitigations are in place. So we've left that at amber at this stage. The other amber aspect is the corporate, again, a massive part of the programme. And this is particular amber because, as you will be aware, we are now going through the work around HR and the key activity around the identified tiers 1 to 3 structures throughout the whole of North Northamptonshire, West Northamptonshire and NCC. So that process is underway. It deals with the disaggregation of staff as well from NCC and moving to North and West. And until that is concluded, the overall status of this programme will always remain amber, and we'll keep that under a close watching brief. Just another point to point out, though it is green, we have now very clearly split the programmes around place. So predominantly district and boroughs, but also obviously highways and some of those major services. We've split those into north and west now. And as we move into this, as I've mentioned before, implementation phase, then that work it becomes very clear that there's very much a reference on north and west there. Moving on to the next slide, Ben. Again, lots of things I think have probably been covered here previously. We've now moved into a governance structure that starts to move much more towards a separate governance for North and West again. But clearly we still need to hold all of those joint things together. As has been mentioned earlier during the budgetary process, we do from the blueprint have a range of hosted services, hosted both by the North and the West on each other's behalf. I'm going to talk about some of that when I come on to the critical products later. But it's really important that those things now that are considered by the North and are only decisions for the North sit in the governance at that point, and similarly for the West. The other point I wanted to make is that how we're starting to move now into clear arrangements for what I call transformation as well. So it isn't just about gluing those services together post-vesting day. It is about working together to start to aggregate those services and develop a roadmap and a plan post-vesting day for the transformation of those services. And that's a key piece of work that is going on. Move on to assurance. The next slide, I think it's a title page. And then the next one is just an overview slide, which is a standard one that explains, I think you've seen that before, that explains where we are with looking at day one assurance on the critical products and service readiness. If I can move on to the critical products, because this is an important one. So we have around 800 critical products that form the plan for developing the North Northamptonshire and West Northamptonshire authorities. And we use this slide to be very clear to you where we are on implementation. So clearly moving to the red one there, which I think is a very important piece, in that the disaggregation of the county-wide systems and data means that we have to split systems, and data protection and GDPR is a major issue there. So we're taking responsive action, talking to MHCLG and the Information Commissioner around this to make sure that clearly that where implementation moves forward, that we have a mitigation for this. So it is absolutely important that because of the COVID and the blueprint and where we have that data, that we have all the data protection and GDPR in place for the splitting and disaggregation of those key services. So that is an area of concern that we're working on at the moment. And the amber ones, where implementation is under increased watch. One of the things I mentioned earlier, then we're working through transferring 2P of staff to day one, working with the trade unions and going through that process as we move towards go live. DBS checks, obviously, we must have that in place for the applicable staff for day one in order for them to be able to carry out their roles legally and safely. We are working on those service agreements. Again, this was mentioned earlier by Glenn. So these are the service agreements that need to be in place to make sure that we're absolutely clear between West and South, the services that are being hosted, the level of performance that will be required. There are two ranges. There are a range of services that are hosted in the first 12 months and will return to the individual unitaries in that period. And there is a second block of services that will go over the 12-month period and will be disaggregated in year two. And then the other point on there is another corporate contracts, where current contracts were required for day one, transfer for day one. And we've been absolutely clear that all of the contracts through the SCO move into the new authorities. So it isn't a question of having new contracts, they move into the new authorities. It's not even a form of contract novation. moving on to the next slide, it is a blank one, but I think that's a really important one, because this is the slide that makes it absolutely clear that there are no issues around service implementation that hasn't started or at concern or under increased watch, as we're here today, that would have a significant impact on day one service readiness. Just moving quickly on to the next slides around change. You know, we have a range of change managers that work with change champions that are volunteers throughout all of the organisations in Northamptonshire. They are working to support officers through that whole change process, particularly around things that are coming up. So we're trying to anticipate where staff have concerns, where they need extra support, and to make sure that goes in place. So of course, because of adult social care had an earlier go live, as I'm sure you're aware, and that was launched in October, that slide just gives you some feedback from the staff and to show how that change process is working. And moving on to the next one, similarly with the Children's Trust that went live on the 1st of November, and all of the work that the change champions are being supported through within the service area in children's to ensure that it doesn't feel like operationally there's step change, but they're getting that support through. Another major change that I'm sure some of you as members have all been impacted on the next slide, is the rollout of MS365. We've done we've done Kettering, Daventry and Corby. I know Wellingborough was last weekend. East Northamptonshire is coming up this weekend for the migration to MS365. You'll see from that slide, we've shared this and those numbers keep coming up as we go through this. The amount of mailboxes, the amount of groups, and the considerable amount, 7.45 million migrated emails through that process. So we're going through. I think the particular really important here about joint working is that we're learning lessons each time we move forward with this system. So as I say, we started off and KBC have learned lessons, and then they've passed that on through the rollout, and as we move through to the other authorities. So NBC and NCC will be early in the new year on that migration. Moving on to another ICT system that went live actually, just saying it is to go live on the 7th of December. I can confirm last weekend that Eclipse, the system that supports the adults service, went live. Another critical part of the whole ICT infrastructure, significant impact on our users obviously, and on the staff. And that was smoothly went through. Then obviously there's always a number of issues through an ICT change, but that went live on Monday, and that has started to work well. And just wanted to show how the change champions and the change managers had worked with the 76 clips, the 76 super users that have supported that process as well. Just following on with the last change slide, just some focused areas of change, and just to show some other areas. Ourselves as myself as the Transformation Director for the North, Jane Carr as the Transformation Director for the West, are now doing live Q&A sessions. We've met with the change champions, that's gone down well. New members of the leadership team are now getting out there, obviously virtually, because that's the environment that we're working in at the moment. And also we worked with the trade union chair to do an interview with the aim of providing clarity to those change champions as well on their different role, because the trade union obviously has a role through all of this change, and how that works well and supports the role of the change champions and vice versa. The last change on this, the last slide on this point just makes it clear about that rollout, extra rollout of communication and engagement. So some of that work that's going on to support all of that change, and also, of course, as you'll be aware now, we've now gone public with the new logos. We did some promotion around that. You'll have seen the new logo for the Northamptonshire. We've got some more consultation going on. The housing allocation consultation launched. obviously we're supporting the planning for the ongoing budget budget consultations that you've contributed tonight. There's further work to go on the development of those visions and values. I think they've been referred to tonight as well, and support for the North and West leadership and the planning, particularly for residents, around our Day One campaign. I think it's the 22nd of December will be 100 days to go live. But we're using that as the 100 days to make that key point. And we've gone past we've gone way past the number of working days in terms of, we're down to about 70 something now, but there's 100 days till go live on the 22nd of December, I think. So just moving, I think Glenn's going to pick up on the finance report and the finance slide.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. In terms of the position shown in the finance report, there's two areas that are covered this time round. First of all, I'll go through the financial position on the Future Northants programme, and then I'll also go through what is part of the quarterly update in terms of the position for the 8 sovereign councils. So first of all, the position on the Future Northants programme. As you can see from section 2 of the report, the investment side of the budget is now reporting an underspend against the level of budget. That underspend has arisen because we've now appointed to the statutory posts. That process is now complete. And due to the various start dates of different individuals being different from what was budgeted, there is now a favourable variance of £190,000 in relation to the investment side of the budget for the current year. In terms of the benefits realisation, as reported to you previously, there has been an adverse variance on the benefits realisation side. That has increased a bit further since last month. Once again, it's a slippage in some of the savings coming through. And it's primarily due to COVID, as is outlined in the benefits realisation section of the report. It's the change this month is specifically in relation to the home to school transport income being less than was budgeted. And as it says there, that was directly as a result of COVID. So in terms of the overall position for the Future Northants programme budget in the current year, since last month, there's been a favourable movement overall of £58,000. So that's, and just a reminder that any of the slippages in those benefits from the current financial year, they are still expected to be achieved. It's just that they will be achieved in a later financial year. And the process that we've gone through in terms of the developing the draft budget that we spoke about earlier, those benefits in future years have been split between the North and the West and allocated into the budget process accordingly. Okay, I'd now like to take us on to the other part of the report, which is the table which shows the outturn positions of each of the sovereign councils around Northamptonshire. What you'll see from that is that all of the district and borough councils are facing pressures on their budget as a result of COVID, because the money that's coming from government isn't expected to cover all of the costs and lost income that's being incurred by the district and boroughs. It's a slightly different position at the county, where there has been at the moment more government grant received than is expected to be the adverse position in terms of the COVID expected costs that are expected to come through. But overall, across the whole county, there is a deficit of about £2.5 million as a result of the COVID not being fully funded from government. So each of the councils is either looking at further grants coming through from COVID and lobbying for that to make sure all of the costs are covered, or they are looking at their own further efficiencies within those budgets in year, and also potentially closing the shortfall by utilising a drawdown from reserves in the year. So that's a quick summary of the Future Northants programme finance position and also the current position of each of the sovereign councils. I don't know whether Lisa's got any further slides to go through. If not, so I guess it's back to the chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Questions? Can I see some hands? Anybody?
Chair, we've got Councillor Henley and then Councillor Hakewell.
Thank you very much. Councillor Henley.
Thank you, Chair. It's on the programme status summary. The officer gave a detailed response as to why they were marked as amber, but I didn't hear from the officer as to where they are today. Given this report is 6 weeks old, and I won't go back down the road of how late this is, can she confirm where we are now on those 3 amber items, or in fact anything else that may be going amber?
Yes, indeed. I was ready for that, Councillor Henley, because as you said last time, yes, of course. And you'll see that the report goes to the shadow exec just for the next shadow exec. So we are moving into an area, as I said last time, where we will have more ambers coming forward. We haven't absolutely finalised it yet, but I suspect adults and customer contact and digital will remain green. And we believe that the estimated direction of travel for the next period would be green. All other areas I would suspect will start to move towards amber, and we will be keeping a close eye on those. And I think that will be the natural expectation, particularly as we move into the new year around that implementation phase. We will be moving. We have no estimated direction of travel towards red at all. But we are, because of the way that the programme is working, we are working towards keeping our eye on all of those areas and moving mostly towards amber in those other areas, predominantly because it's mostly around those issues still that we talked about there earlier. We will still be in a position of negotiations with staff around terms and conditions. We will still be going through a recruitment process for tier 1 to 3 over the next month. We are still not aware of whether those risks around resources will be completed, because those audits will still be still ongoing and are not completed. In Place North, which you will be particularly interested in, I suspect, rather than necessarily Place West, we're looking at work around housing specifically, and making sure that we are balancing the resources around COVID that are being used alongside some of those services in Place North as well. So I think it's realistic. I think between now and 31st of March, we'll be keeping a very, very close eye, as we would need to, on all of these. I think I'd be more worried if things we were saying they were green and they weren't, but we're moving into a very different phase of this programme. So I'd be concerned if it was red. I have no indications that anything's red. Red would be indicating that we was having a significant impact on safe and legal, but we are moving into a very complex part of this programme to deliver those services on the 1st of April, yes.
Adam, is that okay? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Adam, yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Hakewell.
Yes, this is probably more for Glenn. On the outturn position of all Northamptonshire authorities, as I understand it, loss of income, the government have a factor of 75% that they were prepared to make up, for example, for loss of car parking income in the case of Kettering. That will not come back through lobbying, as I understand it. So when we talk of the 2.5 million and lobbying government to try and bridge the gap, should there be another column on that chart that shows those areas where government has already told us they're not going to bridge the gap from commercial income?
Well, it's essentially areas like that. That's where sovereign councils will be using either wider efficiencies within the revenue budget to close that position off, and or a potential drawdown from reserves in the year. But you are right, there are some impacts like commercial investment income, which the government aren't supporting.
So when you lobby for that, the 2.510 million, that is losses incurred with what's in the right-hand column, but actually trying to get it back from government would be less than 2.510.
That's right, yes. And that's why if you look at the heading at the top, it refers to the income grant. That's essentially the sales fees and charges monies that you do. And the other ones are efficiencies and use of reserves.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments or observations? Any other hands, Paul?
No, Chair.
Yeah. Just one comment. It's to do with staffing structure. There is still massive confusion with the staff on some of the old LGSS parts of the authority where people have been, Northamptonshire County Council have been working from Cambridgeshire or Milton Keynes or whatever. People don't know if they're going to be put out to the west or whether they're going to be working in the north. And we've been told some staff from North Northants may be TUPE'd over for a year to the west, and that is uncertainty for a lot of people, and hopefully that can be sorted out soon. Don't want an answer on it, but it's something we have to look at. Thank you. So now thank you for that. Now moving on, forward planning decisions, March 2021. Whose is this?
I suppose I'll take it, Chair. It's really only to note for information, and I suppose if there are any issues coming up that members of the committee wish to take a particular interest in. I mean, I should say, as I think Martin Hammond said last time, I think, it is a living document. In fact, it lives a bit too much for my liking, but it does change fairly regularly. So this is the position as of 5 working days ago. But it's really for members to note at this stage.
Okay, then. Any comments on that?
Noted.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, thank you. Any other hands up? No. Moving on then. So now we're on to the work programme. Who's going to speak on this? Have we got any chairs of the task and finish groups who want to say anything?
Chair, you've got Councillor Lawman here who may be able to contribute on the climate change. And in Councillor Harrison's absence, I'll just say a very quick word about the blueprint group.
Yeah. Councillor Lawman, do you want to comment on the climate change thing?
Yeah, the update for everybody is that our task and finish group has had 3 meetings so far. More are planned during the next 6 weeks. Meetings have been lively and energetic, and I think we are all united. We are anxious that the amount of work to be done doesn't really fit in the time available, so we are going to press on with as much as we can and the speed we and our officers are able to. For instance, we've got 1 more meeting in December, and then we've got 3 meetings set up for January. To date, we've looked in depth at how the council can show leadership on the climate change agenda, leading by example, being appropriately resourced, which is a concern to us, and especially asking that a cabinet member at that time will have the full responsibility also for climate change. We've looked at the housing standards and the differences between, or variances between, the different sovereigns. and the energy management systems already in use in some councils. And we've had a fantastic presentation at the last Task and Finish group with the examples of Corby, I nearly said, of Kettering. Of course, Corby is just as good. And some examples of how energy efficient measures have transformed the lives of those who now live in those houses and flats. We've set up an email drop box, as we call it, for interested people to submit their ideas, and they will be then fed into the final Task and Finish group conclusions. There's been a modest amount so far of its use, and hopefully it will increase then in December and January of people putting their ideas forward. Our intention is to then provide a framework document for this committee in late January, which will set out where we feel as the Task and Finish group, or where the Overview and Scrutiny group then sees the council should focus, or the new council should focus its effort on the first few years of its life. It will probably be something like a 10-15 page document setting out some essential requirements and some headings for the unitary to populate with detailed action plans and targets. Our other stakeholders in the period, it will be consulted on with residents and our stakeholders between February and May, so that the new authority can then have a flying start putting its strategy together once it's been elected. And that's really, I think, in a nutshell, where we are in our programme.
Thank you for that. Any other members of the committee want to say something quickly?
Sorry, Chair, Councillor Lee wishes to come in.
Yeah, Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add, because we didn't progress quickly enough in the first few meetings. Unfortunately, two of the important questions from the Centre for Public Scrutiny have fallen by the wayside, and these are quite important, and they're not necessarily the most expensive ones. So how is the council promoting climate education? I mean, we need, it is a shame. And another one about assisting the most vulnerable in society. It is a shame that those have fallen by the wayside. And I hope that the email address where people can send their information will be publicized sufficiently, because I don't know how many people know that it exists. I will certainly play my role in that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul, could we get the Public Relations Department to get that email address out, and maybe a comment from Councillor Lawman on getting people to engage with us? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll pass that along, Chair.
Is that okay with you, Councillor Lawman?
Absolutely. There, Callum Galuzzi is our committee officer, and he's been really, really good in sending the information out.
Yeah, thank you very
much. I'll liaise with Callum on that, Chair.
Yeah, okay. And on the other Task and Finish group, Paul, Helen isn't here today.
No, really to say that the Task and Finish group's holding its first, it had a scene setter meeting, and it's holding its first meeting, proper meeting next week, where it's going to be looking at housing standards, both in terms of public sector and private sector houses. So that's its first big chunk of the blueprint that it's going to look at. And then obviously we'll be looking at other areas after the new year, public health and adult social care. I think I've got that right, councillors. If there's any councillors online who think I've got it wrong, please.
Any councillors want to add? And just before anybody comes in, as you're aware, Paul, Corby did a lot of good work on the Corby standard for housing, and you may want to get Councillor Bob Isles involved, or some of our officers, because the Corby standard for housing was a really, really good idea, and it's something we've had to drop during COVID, but it's something to work forward on. Any other comments on this?
No, Chair. I think we're clear.
No. Yeah, on the work programme, I'm not saying that it's got to come forward, but I think that we have to look how the staff are moving forward, and if need be, and with an agreement of Victoria, we may at a later date want to get the trade unions and HR departments along. But I know how much work is going on, and that's something we may have to look at in the future. Anything else on the work programme?
No, Chair. No.
No.
Hands?
No. Exempt items, 011, anything there?
No.
012, urgent items reconsidered?
No.
Right, can I thank everybody for attending? It's a long meeting. It's probably going to be the longest meeting that we have because it's a budget. Thanks to, as I said, all the officers for their contributions, and of course to all the elected members who have been working above and beyond what they normally do. So thank you. Have a nice evening, and we may be able to catch up with EastEnders later. And last time I looked, Celtic were winning 2-1. So